Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he stumbled across the finish line. His legs felt like rubber, and his lungs burned with each breath. Around him, his alien classmates barely looked tired. Some weren't even breathing hard. Dead last. "Again, human," said Vextar, the massive Krathan warrior who stood nearly 8 feet tall. His gray skin gleamed under the training facility lights, and his 4 arms crossed over his broad chest. "Perhaps you should consider a different career path." Jake straightened up, ignoring the pain in his side. "I'm not quitting," he said between gasps. Zira, the sleek Falari scout, flicked her tail in what Jake had learned was amusement. Her cat-like features showed something between pity and admiration. "You humans are strange creatures," she said in her musical voice. "Any sensible being would accept their limitations. The Galactic Defense Academy on Nexus Prime was the most prestigious military school in known space. Only the best from each species earned a spot here." Jake still couldn't believe he'd made it through the entrance exams. Every day since arrival, 3 months ago, had been a struggle to keep up. Commander Talneth approached the group of exhausted cadets. The Zentauran officer's blue skin shimmered as his gill slits opened and closed in the station's recycled air. His large black eyes swept over the training scores on his data pad. "Disappointing times today," the commander announced. "Cadet Morrison, you are falling further behind acceptable standards. The obstacle course should take no more than 15 minutes for a first-year cadet. You completed it in 23 minutes. Jake felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment. The other cadets shifted uncomfortably. Even though they often teased him about being the weakest species in the Alliance, most had grown to respect his determination. "With respect, sir," Jake said, "I finished the course. That has to count for something." Commander Talneth's gills fluttered in what Jake recognized as annoyance. "Finishing is the minimum requirement, cadet. Excellence is what we demand here." The training day continued with weapons practice. Jake hefted the Standard Alliance plasma rifle, a weapon designed to be comfortable for species with various body types. For him, it felt perfectly balanced. For Vexitar, it looked like a toy in his massive hands. For Zira, it seemed slightly too heavy for her graceful build. "Remember," called Instructor Hayes, a human woman who served as one of the few of Jake's species in senior positions. "Plasma weapons have no recoil, but they generate heat with each shot. Manage your power cells wisely." The holographic targets materialized downrange. Jake took aim and fired. His shot went wide, missing by several inches. Beside him, Vexitar's shot punched through the center of his target with devastating force. Zira's shots were precise and rapid, each one finding vital spots on her target's outline. Jake gritted his teeth and fired again. This time his shot clipped the edge of the target. Better, but still not good enough. He could feel the other cadets watching him, some with pity, others with impatience. "Focus on breathing," Instructor Hayes said quietly as she passed behind him. "Humans have steady hands when they're calm." Jake nodded and took a deep breath. His next shot hit closer to center. Not perfect, but progress. He allowed himself a small smile. After weapons training came the evening meal in the Great Hall. Jake sat with his usual group, Vextar, Zira, and a few other cadets from different species. The conversation flowed between several languages, with universal translators helping everyone understand each other. "The combat simulation tomorrow will be challenging," said Nex, a Aquarian whose translucent skin revealed the fluid flowing beneath. "We'll be tested on everything we've learned, so far." Vextar grunted his agreement. "In Krathan culture, we believe that true strength is revealed only under pressure. Tomorrow we will see who belongs here and who does not." Jake kept eating his synthetic protein meal, trying not to think about how many times he'd barely passed. Previous simulations. Each test seemed designed to highlight exactly where humans fell short compared to other species. "What do you think, Jake?" Zira asked. "Are you ready for tomorrow's challenge?" All eyes turned to him. Jake set down his eating utensil and looked around the table. These beings could outrun him, outfight him, and outthink him in most situations, but they kept including him in their group despite his poor performance. "I'll do my best," he said, simply. "That's all I can promise." Vextar's expression softened slightly. "Your best has been enough to get you this far, small human. Perhaps it will be enough tomorrow as well." Later that night, Jake lay in his narrow bunk in the cadet dormitory. Around him, his classmates from various species slept in their preferred conditions. The Aquarian in the next bed floated in a tank of specialized fluid. A Krathon across the room slept standing up, his body locked in a natural resting position. Zira curled up on her sleeping mat like the predator her species had evolved from. Jake stared at the ceiling, thinking about tomorrow's simulation. He'd studied the training materials until his eyes hurt. He'd run extra laps in the gym when others were relaxing. He'd practiced with his weapons until his arms ached. But would it be enough? The thought of failing, of being sent home in disgrace, made his stomach twist. His family had been so proud when he'd been accepted to the academy. His younger sister had bragged to all her friends that her brother was training with aliens. His parents had scraped together their savings to send him. Messages of encouragement. He couldn't let them down. More importantly, he couldn't let himself down. Every human who came after him would be judged partly by how well he performed. The pressure was enormous, but it also gave him strength. Tomorrow's simulation would test everything they'd learned: combat tactics, weapons handling, teamwork, and decision-making under stress. Jake knew he wasn't the strongest or fastest or smartest cadet in his class. But maybe, just maybe, he was stubborn enough to succeed anyway. As sleep finally took him, Jake's last thought was a simple promise to himself. Whatever happened tomorrow, he would not quit. He would not give up. He would keep moving forward no matter what the cost. The alarm klaxons screamed through the training facility as Jake's squad moved through the holographic maze. Red emergency lights flashed overhead, casting strange shadows that made the simulated environment look even more dangerous. Jake pressed himself against a wall, his plasma rifle ready. "This doesn't feel like a normal simulation," Zira whispered, her enhanced hearing picking up sounds the others missed. Her tail twitched nervously, and her pupils had dilated to capture more light. Vextar checked his weapon's power display. The targets seemed more aggressive than usual. And these emergency lights, I've never seen them during training before. Jake wiped sweat from his eyes. The plasma bolt that had hit him 15 minutes ago still made his chest burn. The safety systems should have teleported him out of the exercise when his bio reading showed a direct hit. Instead, he was still here, still moving, still fighting. Something was definitely wrong. The squad rounded a corner and came face with 3 holographic enemies. Jake raised his rifle and fired, his shot going wide as pain flared through his ribs. Vextar's return fire was devastating, punching through 2 targets with explosive force. Zira moved like liquid shadow, flanking the 3rd enemy and eliminating it with precise shots. "Good work," came Commander Talneth's voice through their comm units. But there was something strange in his tone, a tension that hadn't been there. At the start of the exercise, Jake stumbled slightly as they moved deeper into the maze. The pain in his chest was getting worse, and he could feel something warm and wet inside his training suit. Blood, probably. The plasma bolt had done more damage than he'd first thought. "You all right, human?" Vextar asked, noticing Jake's unsteady movement. "I'm fine," Jake lied, gritting his teeth against another wave of pain. "Just keep moving." They reached what should have been the final objective, a holographic command center they needed to secure. But as they approached, the simulation suddenly flickered and died. The maze walls disappeared, leaving them standing in the empty training chamber. Emergency lights continued to flash, and new alarms joined the chorus of warning sounds. "All cadets, report to designated safe zones immediately," came a voice over the station's general announcement system. "This is not a drill. Hostile forces have breached the outer perimeter. Repeat, this is not a drill." Jake felt his blood turn to ice. Real enemies, real danger. And he was injured, barely staying on his feet, with no way to get medical attention. The training chamber's main doors sealed with a heavy metallic clang. Emergency blast shields slammed down over the windows. In seconds, they were trapped in the lower levels of the facility. "Commander Talneth, requesting immediate extraction," Vextar spoke into his comm unit. Static crackled back at them. Zira moved to one of the sealed doors, pressing her ear against the metal. "I can hear explosions above us, multiple levels. Whatever's happening, it's big." Jake leaned against a wall, trying to stay upright. The burning in his chest was spreading, and his vision kept going blurry around the edges. Every breath felt like swallowing glass. "Jake," Zira said sharply, "your bio readings are all wrong. What happened to you during the simulation?" He looked down at his training suit's display. The readings showed internal trauma, blood loss, and system shock. Numbers that should mean he was unconscious or dead. But he was still standing, still aware, still able to fight if needed. "I took a plasma hit early in the exercise," he admitted. "Should have been teleported out, but the system malfunctioned." Vextar's 4 eyes widened in shock. "A direct plasma hit? At training power levels, that would hospitalize most species for days. How are you still conscious?" Jake honestly didn't know. He felt terrible, worse than he'd ever felt in his life. But his body kept moving, kept responding to his commands. Maybe it was adrenaline. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was something unique about human physiology that even the medical textbooks didn't understand. "We need to find another way out," he said, pushing himself away from the wall. Standing up made the world spin, but he stayed upright. The comm system crackled to life. Commander Talneth's voice came through, distorted by interference. "All trapped personnel, maintain position and await rescue. Hostile forces have infiltrated multiple levels. The Ravager Collective has launched a coordinated attack on the station." The Ravager Collective. Jake had read about them in his strategic studies classes. Pirates and mercenaries who specialized in attacking military installations. They were ruthless, well-equipped, and had no interest in taking prisoners. "How long until rescue?" Zira asked into her comm. More static, then a grim response. "Unknown. All evacuation routes are compromised. You may need to find your own way to safety." Jake checked his weapon's power cell, 3/4 charge remaining. Enough for a fight if it came to that. Beside him, his squadmates were doing the same calculations. "The auxiliary corridors," Vextar said suddenly. "Maintenance tunnels that run between the main levels. They're not on most station maps, but they exist." "Can you find them?" Jake asked. The big Krathen nodded. "My people are natural tunnel fighters. I can navigate underground passages. They moved toward what Vextar identified as a maintenance access panel." Jake brought up the rear, his movements getting slower and more painful with each step. The warm wetness inside his suit was spreading, and he could taste copper in his mouth. As they entered the narrow maintenance tunnel, Jake felt his legs start to give out. He caught himself against the tunnel wall, breathing hard. "You need medical attention," Zira said, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "These readings suggest massive internal bleeding." "I'm fine," Jake insisted, though they all knew it was a lie. What none of them understood was how a human could still be functional with those kinds of injuries. In their species, such trauma would mean immediate unconsciousness and possible death. But Jake kept moving, kept thinking, kept pushing forward. They made slow progress through the maintenance tunnels. Behind them, the sounds of battle grew louder. Explosions, weapons fire, and the distant screams of combat echoed through the station's structure. "The main evacuation bay should be 2 levels up," Vexatar reported, consulting his mental map of the station. Jake nodded, not trusting his voice. Each breath was an effort now, and dark spots kept appearing at the edges of his vision. But he couldn't stop. His friends needed him to stay strong, to keep moving, to not become a burden that would slow them down. In the Academy's command center far above them, Commander Talneth watched Jake's bio readings with growing amazement. The human cadet should have been unconscious hours ago. By all medical knowledge, he should be dead. Yet the readings showed him still active, still mobile, still somehow functional. The commander made a note in his personal log. Perhaps the Alliance had underestimated human capabilities. Perhaps there was more to this supposedly weak species than anyone had realized. Jake Morrison was about to teach them all a lesson in human endurance. The maintenance tunnel ended at a damaged cargo bay. Through gaps in the twisted metal, Jake could see armed figures moving in the shadows. Ravager troops, at least 6 of them, had set up a defensive position near the only exit. Jake's vision blurred as another wave of pain shot through his chest. The bio readings on his suit showed critical levels across the board. Internal bleeding, system shock, possible organ damage. He should be dead, but somehow his body kept working. "We need to get past them," Vextar whispered, studying the enemy. Positions through a crack in the wall. 6 armed hostiles with superior position, Zira analyzed quietly. They have clear sight lines on all approaches. Any frontal assault would be suicide. Jake leaned against the tunnel wall, fighting to stay conscious. His breathing was shallow, and each heartbeat sent fire through his ribs. But his mind was still working, still planning. "What if we don't go around them?" he said softly. Both aliens looked at him with concern. His face was pale and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air. "Jake, you need to rest," Zira said. "Your bio readings are impossible. You should be unconscious." "I can create a distraction," Jake continued, ignoring her concern. "Draw their attention while you two flank them from the side passages. Vextars." 4 arms crossed his chest. "That is not tactical thinking. That is suicide thinking." Jake managed a weak smile. "Maybe, but I'm already supposed to be dead according to these readings. What's the worst that could happen?" The logic was insane, but it was also strangely sound. Jake was operating on borrowed time, functioning far beyond what should be possible for his species. If anyone was going to take the high-risk role, it should be him. "Human stubbornness," Zira muttered, but there was admiration in her voice. They worked out the plan quickly. Jake would enter the cargo bay from the main access, moving erratically to confuse enemy targeting. His job was to stay alive long enough for Vextar and Zira to reach flanking positions. Jake checked his plasma rifle one last time, half power remaining. Enough for the job if he made every shot count. He looked at his alien friends, knowing this might be the last time he saw them. "When I'm in position, give me 30 seconds before you move," he said. "Jake," Vextar said seriously, "if you fall, we will come for you." "No," Jake replied firmly. "If I fall, you keep going. Get to the evacuation point. That's an order." Neither alien could understand how Jake could discuss his own death so calmly. In their cultures, survival was the primary instinct, but humans seemed to have something else, something that kicked in when others depended on them. Jake took a deep breath and stepped into the cargo bay. The Ravagers spotted him immediately. Weapons fire erupted across the space, plasma bolts and projectile rounds filling the air where he'd been standing. But Jake wasn't there anymore. His injuries made him move strangely, stumbling and weaving in patterns that no trained soldier would expect. The Ravagers, used to fighting predictable military opponents, found themselves unable to track his erratic movement. Jake dove behind a cargo container as shots exploded around him. Pain flared through his body, but adrenaline kept him moving. He popped up and fired twice, his shots forcing the enemies to take cover. "Human target northwest corner," one of the Ravagers shouted in their harsh language. Jake was already moving, his unsteady gait carrying him to a new position. A projectile round clipped his shoulder, spinning him around, but he used the momentum to roll behind another barrier. From their hidden positions, Vextar and Zira watched in amazement. Jake's movements were completely unpredictable, neither the swift precision of Falari combat nor the overwhelming power of Krathan warfare. He fought like someone who had nothing left to lose, and it was surprisingly effective. The Ravagers concentrated, their fire on Jake's position, exactly as planned. They didn't notice the massive Krathan warrior moving along the eastern wall, or the sleek Falari scout approaching from the west. Jake counted the seconds in his head. 25, 26. Almost time for his friends to strike. He prepared for one final distraction. Standing up from cover, Jake charged directly at the enemy position. It was insane, suicidal, and completely unexpected. The Ravagers panicked, their careful defensive formation breaking as they tried to track the wounded human running straight at them. That's when Vextar struck. The Krathan warrior erupted from concealment like a force of nature. His four arms wielded weapons with devastating precision, and his massive frame absorbed enemy fire that would have stopped other species. Two Ravagers fell before they could react. Zira moved like a shadow made flesh, her natural agility enhanced by years of training. She struck from behind, her shots precise and deadly. Two more enemies dropped. Jake's wild charge ended when a plasma bolt caught him in the side, spinning him around and sending him crashing into a stack of cargo containers. The impact should have killed him, but he rolled with it, somehow ending, up behind cover with his rifle still in his hands. The remaining Ravagers found themselves caught between three different firing positions, their tactical advantage completely destroyed. Vextar's overwhelming firepower, Zira's precise shots, and Jake's unpredictable harassment broke their formation completely. In less than 2 minutes, the cargo bay was secure. Vextar and Zira rushed to Jake's position. They found him propped against a cargo container, his training suit showing critical alerts across every system. Blood was visible through tears in the fabric, and his breathing was labored. "How are you still conscious?" Vextar asked in amazement. Jake tried to answer but started coughing instead. When he pulled his hand away from his mouth, it was bloody. The plasma bolt had done serious internal damage, adding to the injuries he'd sustained earlier. "We need to get you to medical immediately," Zira said, her scanner showing readings that shouldn't be possible in a living being. "Not yet," Jake managed to say. "Have to reach the evacuation point first." In the command center above, Commander Talneth watched the biodata in disbelief. He called up medical references for human physiology, comparing them to Jake's current readings. According to every textbook in the Alliance database, Cadet Morrison should have died hours ago. Yet not only was he still conscious, he'd just led a successful assault against a superior enemy force. The commander began updating his reports. The Alliance's understanding of human limitations was clearly incomplete. These readings suggested capabilities that no one had previously documented. Jake struggled to his feet, using his rifle as a support. Each movement was agony, but he was still mobile, still functional, still able to fight if necessary. The evacuation point is 3 levels up, he said, his voice weak but determined. Zira and Vextar exchanged glances. Their human squad mate was operating far beyond anything their species could endure. They were beginning to understand that human weakness might be something entirely different from what they'd been taught. Jake Morrison was redefining what it meant to be strong. Jake's legs finally betrayed him as they climbed the emergency stairwell. His vision went white for a moment, and he collapsed against the metal railing, his rifle clattering down several steps. "Jake!" Zira caught him before he could fall further. His biosuit was screaming warnings now. Critical blood loss, system shock, multiple organ failure. The readouts showed levels that should have meant death, yet somehow his heart kept beating and his lungs kept working. "I'm okay," Jake whispered, though they all knew it was a lie. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, and his skin had taken on a grayish pallor. Vextar climbed back down to retrieve Jake's weapon. "You are not okay, human. You are dying." "Not yet," Jake said, forcing himself to stand. "Still have a job to do." They were 2 levels away from the evacuation point when the stairwell lights went out. Emergency power was failing throughout this section of the station. In the darkness, they could hear weapons fire echoing from above and below. "Life support is failing in this sector," Zira reported, checking her scanner. "Oxygen levels are dropping." Jake nodded, not trusting his voice. Each breath was getting harder, and the thin air wasn't helping. His body was shutting down piece by piece, but his mind remained focused on a single goal: getting his friends to safety. They moved through corridors filled with smoke and debris. Sections of the ceiling had collapsed, and sparks flew from damaged power conduits. The station was dying around them, and Jake was dying with it. "There," Vexitar pointed ahead. "The evacuation bay should be through that doorway." But as they approached, they could hear voices. Ravager troops had reached the evacuation point first. Through a gap in the damaged wall, they could see at least 8 hostiles setting up defensive positions around the escape pods. "Too many," Zira whispered. "We need to find another route." Jake slumped against the wall, his strength finally giving out. The biosuit's medical systems were pumping stimulants and pain suppressors into his bloodstream, chemicals that would be lethal to most species, but barely kept him conscious. "There is no other route," he said quietly. "This was the backup evacuation point. If it's compromised, there's nowhere else to go." The reality of their situation settled over them. They were trapped between hostile forces, on a dying station, with no way out. Jake was barely alive. Zira and Vextar were running low on ammunition, and time was running out. "I have an idea," Jake said, struggling to sit up straighter. "No," Vextar said immediately. "Whatever you're thinking, the answer is no." Jake managed a weak smile. "You don't even know what I was going to say." "You were going to suggest sacrificing yourself to save us," Zira said. "Your species seems to have a disturbing tendency toward martyrdom." "It's not martyrdom," Jake replied. "It's mathematics. 1 life versus 2 lives. The equation is simple." Both aliens were horrified by his casual discussion of his own death. In their cultures, survival was sacred. The idea of deliberately throwing away one's life was almost incomprehensible. "I can draw their attention," Jake continued. "Create enough chaos for you two to reach the escape pods. Once you're away from the station, you can call for help." "We don't leave squad mates behind," Vexitar said firmly. Jake looked at his friends with genuine affection. They'd gone from viewing him as the weakest member of their team to being willing to die rather than abandon him. The irony wasn't lost on him. "This isn't abandonment," he said. "This is completing the mission. Your job is to survive and report what you've learned. My job is to make sure you can do that." His bio readings flickered as another system failed. The medical nanobots in his bloodstream were running out of materials to work with. His body was consuming itself just to stay functional. "How long?" Zira asked, studying the readings. "Minutes, maybe," Jake admitted. "The suit says I should have died hours ago. I'm running on fumes and stubbornness now." In the command center, Commander Talaneth watched the biodata with fascination and horror. He'd called in Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station's chief medical officer, to review the readings. "This is impossible," Dr. Vasquez said, studying the data. "No human should be able to function with these injury levels. His blood loss alone should have caused unconsciousness. Yet he continues to operate," Commander Talaneth observed. "He led a successful assault, navigated damaged sections of the station, and is still making tactical decisions. It's like his body refuses to acknowledge that it should shut down," the doctor mused. "I've never seen anything like it." Back in the corridor, Jake was preparing for his final mission. He checked his plasma rifle, quarter power remaining. Enough for one last fight. He looked at Vextar and Zira, memorizing their faces. "When I start moving, Count to 60 before you follow, he instructed. Don't come after me, no matter what happens. Jake, Zira said softly. Why are you doing this? You could just rest. Here, let the pain medications work. Die peacefully. Jake thought about that for a moment. It would be easier. The suit's medical systems could probably keep him comfortable for his final minutes. But that wasn't who he was. Because you two are going to be great officers someday, he said. The Alliance needs leaders who understand that strength isn't just about physical power. You've learned that from watching me fail at everything except refusing to quit. He struggled to his feet one last time, using his rifle as a crutch. Every movement was agony, but he moved anyway. Besides, he added with a ghost of his old grin, I'm curious to see how long this stubborn human body will keep working. Jake Morrison walked toward the evacuation bay, leaving his friends behind. In his wake, 2 alien cadets began to understand what human courage really meant. It wasn't the absence of fear. It wasn't superior strength or speed or intelligence. It was the simple refusal to stop moving when others needed you to succeed, even when logic said it was impossible, even when your body said it was over, even when death was reaching out to claim you. Humans just kept moving. Jake woke up 3 days later in the medical bay, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed with alien efficiency. Dr. Elena Vasquez sat beside his bed, studying a data pad with the intensity of someone trying to solve an impossible puzzle. You shouldn't be alive, she said, without looking up from her readings. Jake tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. Dr. Vasquez noticed and handed him a cup of water. The simple act of drinking felt like the most wonderful thing in the world. Vextar. And Zira? He managed to ask. Safe. They made it to the evacuation point and called in the cavalry. The Ravager attack was repelled with minimal casualties. Dr. Vasquez finally looked at him. Thanks to intelligence gathered from your squad's movements through the station. Jake closed his eyes in relief. His friends were alive. The mission had succeeded. Everything else was just details. Your final assault on the evacuation bay was recorded by security cameras, Dr. Vasquez continued. Command is calling it the most tactically unsound and strategically brilliant maneuver they've ever witnessed. Jake remembered fragments of that final fight. Walking directly into enemy fire, moving in patterns so random that trained soldiers couldn't predict where he'd be next. Using his own failing body as a weapon of confusion and chaos, he'd drawn the Ravager's attention long enough for Vextar and Zira to reach the escape pods. How many did I take down? He asked. All of them, Dr. Vasquez replied. You eliminated 8 trained Ravager troops while suffering injuries that should have killed you 5 times over. The doctor pulled up holographic displays of Jake's medical scans. His body looked like a battlefield marked with internal damage that painted a picture of impossible survival. Plasma burns to 60% of your torso. Projectile wounds that missed vital organs by millimeters. Blood loss that should have caused brain death. System shock that would shut down any known biological system. She shook her head. Yet here you are, conscious and coherent. Human stubbornness, Jake said weakly. No, Dr. Vasquez replied seriously. This goes beyond psychology. Your body continued to function at levels that defy medical understanding. Your cellular regeneration accelerated beyond normal parameters. Your brain maintained consciousness despite oxygen deprivation that would cause permanent damage in other species. She pulled up comparative charts showing human versus alien physiology under extreme stress. We've had to rewrite our medical textbooks, she admitted. Humans don't just refuse to quit mentally. Your bodies refuse to quit physically. When others depend on you, your species seems to activate capabilities that we never knew existed. Over the following days, Jake received a steady stream of visitors. Vextar came first, his massive frame somehow looking smaller in the medical bay's sterile environment. My people measure strength by how much weight you can lift, How hard you can strike, the Krathen said quietly. But you have taught me about a different kind of strength. The strength to continue when continuation should be impossible. Zira visited next, her usual graceful movements subdued by something approaching reverence. In Falari culture, we pride ourselves on efficiency and precision, she said. But you showed us something more valuable. The willingness to be inefficient if it saves others. To waste your own resources so that others might succeed. Commander Talneth's visit was more formal, but equally significant. The Zentaran officer carried a datapad filled with new Alliance military protocols. Your actions have changed how we think about human capabilities, he announced. The Alliance Council has authorized a complete review of human placement in military roles. Your species will no longer be classified as support personnel only. Jake felt a surge of pride, not for himself, but for every human who would come after him. No more dead last in every category. No more assumptions about human limitations. There's more, Commander Talneth continued. The Academy is implementing new training protocols based on what we learned from studying your performance. We're calling it endurance leadership, the ability to function when function should be impossible. Weeks passed before Jake was cleared for duty. His recovery was slow but complete, another medical impossibility that left the doctors scratching their heads. By the time he returned to active training, word of his actions had spread throughout the Academy. Other cadets looked at him differently now, not with pity or condescension, but with a respect that bordered on awe. The human who couldn't run fast or lift heavy objects had redefined what it meant to be strong. His first day back in training brought a surprise. Jake had been promoted to squad leader, with Vextar and Zira as his second and third in command. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. The physically weakest member of the team was now responsible for leading it. "How do you want to run training?" Vextar asked as they prepared for their first exercise together. Jake thought about that question. He could see new cadets watching him, wondering what made this unremarkable human worth following. Some were aliens who'd heard stories about human endurance. Others were humans who hoped to prove they could be just as tough. "We run it like it matters," Jake said finally, "like someone's life depends on us getting it right." The exercise went well. Jake still finished last in most physical challenges, still struggled with tasks that came easily to other species. But when the simulation threw impossible scenarios at them, when logic said the mission was hopeless, his squad kept moving. They'd learned the most valuable lesson the Academy could teach. Sometimes the difference between victory and defeat isn't strength or speed or intelligence. Sometimes it's simply refusing to stop. That evening, Jake sat in the observation lounge looking out at the stars. Vextar and Zira joined him, as had become their custom. "Do you ever think about that day in the cargo bay?" Zira asked. "Every day," Jake admitted. "I should have died there. According to every medical scan, I did die there, several times." "But you didn't," Vextar observed. "Your body found a way to keep going." Jake nodded, watching ships move between the distant stars. Each one carried beings from dozens of different species, all working together to keep civilization running. "I think humans have something the Alliance needs," he said quietly. "Not strength or speed or intelligence, something else." "What?" Zira asked. Jake smiled, remembering that final desperate charge into impossible odds. "We don't know how to quit when others need us to succeed. We literally don't understand that some things are impossible." In the months that followed, Jake Morrison's story spread throughout Alliance space. Military academies began recruiting more humans. Medical research into human endurance capabilities expanded. New tactical doctrines were developed around the concept of impossible continuation. But for Jake, the most important change was simpler. When new cadets arrived at the academy and saw him leading training exercises, they didn't see the weakest member of his species. They saw proof that strength comes in many forms, and sometimes the most valuable soldier is the one who simply refuses to understand that defeat is an option. The human who keeps moving when moving should be impossible. The cadet who takes a hit that would hospitalize most species and just keeps going because someone needs him to succeed. And humans don't know how to quit when others are counting on them.